Stat Rollers Bill with RollStats. Today I want to talk about a game that's very near and dear to my heart. It's one of my favorite TTRPGs of all time. It's actually also one of the most unique and polarizing TTRPGs I've ever played. It really takes the familiar framework of old school D&D and twists it into something darker, stranger, and far more unsettling. Lamentations of the Flame Princess. Created and published by James Edward Raggi IV. This is a staple at my table. I love this game, not just for the way that it runs, but for the way that it feels. So here's the thing. Although Lamentations is a fairly standard retroclone, it's essentially a BX retroclone, it isn't just about dungeon crawls and heroics. It's about surviving in a brutal, uncaring world where horror, madness, and moral ambiguity lurk around every corner, and that's what really sets it apart. That's what makes Lamentations unique. It blends simple, classic mechanics with an atmosphere that constantly keeps you on edge. It's easy enough for new players to pick up, but it's also deep enough for veterans to really sink their teeth into. Lamentations' approach to fantasy, specifically its tone, its theme, and certainly its aesthetics, makes it feel different from anything else in the OSR scene. And the truth is, right, whether you love it or you hate it, you can't deny that Lamentations delivers an experience unlike any other. Lamentations is a game of cosmic horror, moral ambiguity, and just grim survival, where magic is just as likely to doom you as it is to save you, and where the world is really indifferent, I mean, if not outright hostile, to those who dare to explore its mysteries, to reveal the unknown, right? So in this video, I'm going to talk about what makes LotFP unique, explore its mechanics, its themes, and its style, and discuss whether it's the right game for your table, and we're going to do that right now. So at its core, Lamentations is a throwback to old school D&D, and you know, that's part of what drew me in. It's essentially BX, right? Darker BX, but still BX. It takes its inspiration from early editions of Dungeons & Dragons, especially the basic and expert sets that, you know, I love so much, but it refines and reimagines them for a more narrative-driven, horror-infused experience. The mechanics feel familiar, yet somehow different, right? So Lamentations and BX share the same skeleton, but once you dig into the details, they play very differently. Lamentations starts with a BX framework, but it streamlines it, sharpens it, and mutates it into something deadlier, stranger, and more focused on weirdness and horror. More than anything, Lamentations embraces creative problem solving over endless rule checking. You know, it encourages players to think their way out of trouble rather than just rolling dice and hoping for the best. But at the end of the day, if you've played BX, you already understand the fundamentals of Lamentations. I mean, again, it's a retroclone. So rather than break down all of the mechanics and go through all of that, let's just break down what's similar and what's different between the two. So what's the same? You know, what's going to feel familiar? When you open up Lamentations and you've played BX before, what are you going to recognize? Well, when it comes to character creation, Lamentations and BX are practically identical in structure. You roll your stats, pick your class, roll your hit points, buy your gear, and then you're off to, you know, see how long you can survive in whatever world your DM has created for you. So if you've played BX, making a character in Lamentations will feel immediately familiar. Both games follow the old school tradition of rolling 3d6 in order for your 6 ability scores. The 6 ability scores are the same. You don't get to arrange them, you know, however you want. You take what you roll. Though Lamentations lets you swap one ability score with another if, you know, you need to make a more functional character, or if you want to make a character that more fits your idea of, you know, the character that you want to play. This is pure old school design, right? Instead of carefully crafting a mechanically optimized build, you're going to roll the dice and you're going to work with what fate gives you. The dice gods decide, right? So a character with a low strength but high intelligence might naturally become a magic user. A character with high dexterity and low strength might end up being a nimble but weak fighter, right? The randomness pushes players to be creative rather than worrying about min-maxing, which is just boring, right? So both games offer a small but distinct selection of classes, with demi-humans playing race as class. Just like in BX, the demi-humans are race as class. These classes work the same way across both games. Fighters are the combat experts, magic users are fragile spellcasters, and demi-humans combine, aspects of multiple classes. Like the elf is a fighter mage, right? So the biggest difference in classes are that fighters are the only ones who get better at combat. In BX, fighters, clerics, dwarves, elves, and halflings all improve their attack rolls as they level up. In Lamentations, only fighters improve in combat. Every other class is stuck at a flat +1 attack bonus forever. This means fighters are the only viable combat specialists. It makes fighters special. I mean, clerics and dwarves are tough, but they don't get better at hitting things over time. They're at a +1. And elves are fighter mages, yes, but really in name only. I mean, they can fight, for sure, but they never get better at it. And magic users and specialists, they should avoid combat at all costs in Lamentations. It's just not wise for them to wade into battle. If you're playing Lamentations like BX, and you're assuming that any class can be a decent fighter, trust me, you're making a deadly mistake, and you're not going to last long. Another really big change is that the thief is actually replaced by a specialist, right? And skills. So BX has thieves who, have a set skill progression, generally percentile dice, but LotFP replaces thieves with specialists who distribute skill points however they want. So instead of preset thief skills, Lamentations uses a D6 skill system, where 1 in 6 is the default success rate for any character, but the specialists can really mold their character into whatever they want based on how they distribute their skill points, right? I mean, so they could focus on a single skill like stealth and end up with a 4 in 6 chance to be stealthy at level 1, or they could spread out their points to be, like a jack-of-all-trades bard-like character. Or they could boost bushcraft to be like a ranger, sort of a survival expert, or even focus on tinkering to be the party's trap expert, right? This change frees up role-playing. You can really be whatever you want. You're not pigeonholed into just like this thief class. And then there are the casters, right? In Lamentations, magic users and elves are more dangerous and unpredictable. So, I mean, magic in Lamentations essentially follows BX rules, right? It's still Vancian, but magic users and elves must be chaotic, because magic is weird and unnatural and reality warping. And new spells for your spell books, they have to be found, stolen, or researched. They don't just magically appear when you level up. And the spells that you do get are certainly not balanced. Some are going to be wildly powerful, while others can be just deadly to the caster. And some spells, some spells completely break the game. And that's intentional. That's implied and intentional. It's meant to be that way. In BX, magic feels structured and reliable. In Lamentations, it feels dangerous and completely unsettling, right? But in both games, once you pick a class, you can't change it later. Your choice is permanent, and multi-classing just simply isn't an option. You are what you are. You don't get to suddenly become something new. For alignment is basically the same in both games as well, with sort of the 3 standard alignment choices: lawful, neutral, and chaotic. But Lamentations ties alignment more to the cosmic forces at play in the world than morality. I mean, in BX, lawful basically means good, chaotic means evil, and neutral lies somewhere in between, right? It's the cop-out alignment that lets you do anything. But in Lamentations, lawful, neutral, and chaotic are strange cosmic forces. Lawful characters believe in the inevitable order of the universe and Chaotic characters are touched by eldritch forces that erode reality. And neutral characters, well, they're basically just normal mortals trying to get by, right? But alignment does not dictate behavior. A chaotic character doesn't have to be evil, but they are forever changed by these unnatural forces. In HP, it's about the same. In both Lamentations and BX, hit points are rolled at character creation based on your class. You don't get max hit points at level 1. But both games also let you add or subtract your Constitution modifier, and both have a minimum hit point rule, right? So at level 1, you don't start with 1 hit point character, right? Like you get to re-roll that so you don't end up with sort of this hopeless character. But after that, you take your chances. Every time you level up, you roll. If you hit a 1 at level 2, you get 1 additional hit point. But that's great. That allows the dice gods to decide. And then once your hit points are set, you roll 3d6 times 10 silver pieces for starting money versus gold pieces in BX, right? Like, so the money system is similar. It's just that one is based on the gold standard and one is based on the silver. So see, BX uses a gold standard. Everything is priced in gold pieces, but Lamentations uses the silver standard, and everything is priced in silver pieces. And this seems like a little thing, but it actually makes a huge difference in the long run. Gold is rarer and more valuable in Lamentations, and treasure hoards are not as massive as they would be in BX. But honestly, other than the currency difference, the gear buying process is identical, right? Armor, weapons, and equipment cost roughly the same and function in the same way. However, Lamentations is much stricter about encumbrance, so carrying too much is definitely going to slow you down, and you have to think about what you need versus, everything you can carry. But at the end of the day, if you can play BX, you can pick up Lamentations instantly. I guess what I'm saying is, if you've made a character in BX D&D, you can roll up a Lamentations character in minutes. Just be prepared for a world that's more deadly, dark, and less forgiving than traditional fantasy, right? When it comes to combat, Lamentations of the Flame Princess and BX D&D share a fundamental core, but they diverge primarily in feel and in execution, right? Both games are built around fast, deadly encounters, but Lamentations leans heavily into gritty realism, player caution, and cosmic horror, while BX plays things a little more like a traditional high fantasy adventure game. So what do I mean by that, right? Well, let's break this down, comparing where they're the same and where Lamentations goes off in its own direction, right? At first glance, combat in Lamentations looks almost identical. Initiative is rolled and turns go in sequence. You roll a d20 to hit, compare it to armor class, and roll damage if you hit, right? Like it's same, nothing groundbreaking, no real changes. But the subtle changes make a huge difference in how that combat plays out, right? In both games, hit points are low, and even a single hit can just kill a low-level character. And there are no second chances, right? If you go to 0 hit points, you're done. There's no saving throw. There's no sort of, oh, well, you're bleeding out and someone can save you. You're dead. Initiative is a simple d6 roll. Both games use the d6 initiative roll, and initiative is usually rolled per side instead of per character, which makes, combat sort of fast and unpredictable. But Lamentations is more explicit about simultaneous initiative, meaning that even if you kill an enemy, right, they might still land a final blow on you before going down, killing you as well. And, there are no fancy tactics really in either game. There's no godlike feats, no attacks of opportunity, and no, complex maneuvers. Combat is about positioning, choosing battles wisely, and really using the environment to your advantage. It's often best to avoid combat completely, right? And finally, morale matters, right? Both games assume that enemies don't always fight to the death. Monsters and henchmen, they're going to run, they're going to surrender, or they're going to, try to negotiate if they can. So then, what are the differences? Well, As we talked about earlier, only fighters get better at combat. In BX, all classes improve their attack bonus over time. In Lamentations, only fighters get an increasing attack bonus. Every other class stays at +1 forever. And, it's supposed to be that way, right? Like, it's not unfair. It gives the fighter a reason to exist. It means that in Lamentations, combat is a fighter's job, period. Clerics, elves, and dwarves they might hold their own early on, but over time, they stop improving while fighters just continue to get deadlier. And there's no automatic critical hits or fumbles. So I know. In BX, there are no critical hit or fumble rules as written. But let's be honest, most DMs house rule them in, especially critical hit rules, right? But Lamentations explicitly does not have critical hits or fumbles, assuming every hit is already dangerous enough. And trust me, it is. And then there is no resurrection in Lamentations. In BX, high-level clerics can, bring people back from the dead. In Lamentations, resurrection does not exist, at least not in any conventional form. Death is final unless, some eldritch horror brings you back as, something else entirely, right? And finally, when it comes to monsters and foes, Lamentations of the Flame Princess and BX share the same core mechanics, but the nature of monsters, their role in the game, and their impact on the world, it's very, very different in these two games. BX really normalizes monsters, treating them as challenges to be overcome, while Lamentations treats them as mysteries, horrors, and insurmountable threats that should be feared rather than fought, right? So what do I mean by that? Let's talk about what's similar and what's different in how BX and Lamentations handles monsters, right? If you've run monsters in BX, you can pick up a Lamentation stat block and run it without missing a beat. Both games use the same monster stats, right? Like they're basically the same. Armor class, hit dice, attack rolls and damage, movement, morale, and saving throws. They're all going to feel basically the same between both systems. If you know one, you know the other. This means you can convert a BX monster to Lamentations instantly. Just copy over the stats, and you're good to go. But you're probably not going to want to do that because Lamentations treats monsters differently. The main difference is that Lamentations makes monsters unique, right? In BX, monsters are repeatable creatures. Goblins, orcs, trolls, and dragons. They all have sort of expected behaviors, and they can be encountered multiple times throughout a game, let alone throughout a campaign, right? In Lamentations, most monsters are unique, meaning that each encounter is one of a kind. There's no assumption that just because you fought one eldritch horror, you'll know how to fight the next one, right? They're completely different. This makes Lamentations monsters feel more like cosmic horrors from Lovecraft than traditional D&D creatures or high fantasy RPG creatures. I guess what I mean is that there's no assumption of a monster ecosystem in Lamentations. In LotFP, monsters are isolated horrors, meaning that the world doesn't operate on a predictable fantasy ecology. A single monster might wipe out an entire village, infect the land with corruption, or permanently alter reality. This really changes the tone of the game. Where BX can feel like a fantasy adventure, Lamentations feels more like a horror movie where the world is full of things that, really shouldn't be. They're terrifying things that lurk at the edges of reality. So while both BX and Lamentations use the same mechanical framework for running monsters, Lamentations changes the role of monsters in the game completely. This means Lamentations players need to be smarter, more cautious, and more willing to run or negotiate than in BX. If you treat a Lamentations monster like a standard fantasy enemy, you're gonna regret it. But if you approach them like horrors to be understood and escaped, you're gonna survive longer and experience some of the most intense and unsettling encounters in any TTRPG you've ever played. What really sets Lamentations apart for me is its distinct tone and aesthetic. It's unlike any other fantasy RPG I've ever played. So while games like Dungeons & Dragons focus on epic heroics, noble quests, and grand battles, Lamentations thrives in this strange, unsettling, and grotesque atmosphere, right? It's a world where beauty and horror blur together, twisting expectations and keeping your players constantly on edge. They're always on edge. This isn't a game where you feel powerful or heroic. It's a game of survival. The line between reality and nightmare is razor thin, and the world is indifferent at best and outright hostile at worst. The pseudo-historical setting, combined with weird fantasy themes, makes every session feel immersive, unpredictable, and just a little bit wrong, but wrong in all the right ways. Every decision matters, every spell has consequences, and every adventure feels like stepping into the unknown, where the familiar might not be what it seems. In fact, the familiar is rarely what it seems. Right? I mean, if you're looking for something darker, something stranger, something more intense than traditional fantasy TTRPGs, Lamentations delivers a truly unique experience. It doesn't just challenge expectations, it shatters them. This isn't the fantasy I grew up with, and that's exactly why I love it so much. So let's dive into what makes Lamentations' tone and aesthetic so unforgettable. So Lamentations describes itself as a weird fantasy role-playing game. And that label is definitely well-earned. It's truly well-earned. While high fantasy typically conjures images of shining knights, wise wizards, and sort of sweeping kingdoms, Lamentations trades these tropes for a darker, more ambiguous world. Right? It's not so clear-cut. Think H.P. Lovecraft meets the Brothers Grimm with a touch of black metal album art, right? Like, the result is a game that feels eerie, raw, and unpolished. But, again, in the best possible way. The game is less concerned with good versus evil and more focused on survival in a universe governed by strange, malevolent forces that you never truly understand, right? Supernatural horrors, eldritch abominations, and corrupting magic are staples, as are themes of moral ambiguity and, personal greed, right? Players aren't heroes in the traditional sense. They're opportunists, they're wanderers, or even fools who have chosen to delve into places, they don't belong, places better left undisturbed. So one of Lamentations' defining visual thematic features is its pseudo-historical setting, right? The world often feels like a twisted version of early modern Europe, with its grimy streets, religious schisms, and a sense of scientific discovery tinged with superstition, right? This aesthetic grounds the fantastical elements in something relatable and familiar, right? It works because it makes the weirdness stand out even more, right? So weapons and armor reflect the late medieval or early Renaissance periods, emphasizing crossbows, polearms, and like flintlock firearms over magical swords or mythical relics. Towns and villages are dirty, dangerous places filled with unscrupulous merchants, zealous clergy, and desperate peasants. There's a weighty realism to these settings that makes them feel lived in, but also really bleak and oppressive. And magic, when magic appears, it feels alien and dangerous. It's an intrusion into a world not meant for it, right? Rather than an everyday occurrence like it is in most high fantasy RPGs. This is not high fantasy. Lamentations leans heavily into horror, both psychological and visceral. It's not the kind of game where you fight hordes of orcs and feel victorious. It's the kind where you open a door and find something unspeakably wrong, and you spend the rest of the session figuring out how to survive, or just regret opening the door in the first place, right? Like, this horror theme manifests in the game in several ways, right? It runs throughout the game consistently. First and foremost, it appears through cosmic indifference. Like in Lovecraftian fiction, the universe in Lamentations is cold. It's uncaring and hostile. Players are often facing forces beyond their comprehension, right? Like eldritch entities, ancient curses, or unknowable magic. And it makes them feel small and powerless. And number two is the moral ambiguity. I mean, heroes in Lamentations are rare. Most adventurers are motivated by personal greed, ambition, or just desperation, right? Like, just survival is what motivates characters in Lamentations. And even the rare good characters, right? Like the good characters, they're going to find their morality tested as they face choices with no clear right answer. And it's this emphasis on horror and moral ambiguity that creates a tense, oppressive atmosphere where your players, they constantly have to weigh the risks and consequences of their choices and actions. It's really not about saving the day. It's honestly about surviving long enough to see the next day. And that's awesome. It makes the game real. It makes it have consequences. And then third is the idea that magic, is dangerous and unnatural. Magic in Lamentations isn't a tool for solving problems. It is the problem. In most high fantasy games, magic is a reliable source of power. It's a tool wielded by wise clerics or learned wizards who are kind in heart and only want the best for the world. In Lamentations, magic is dangerous. It's unpredictable and corrupting. It warps those who wield it, and it warps the world around them, right? Magic users and clerics have access to powerful spells, no doubt, but every casting carries inherent risk. Magic feels unnatural, even terrifying, in its raw, unbridled power. Players have to think carefully about when, and honestly whether, to use it, right? Like, Lamentations adventures often use magic to highlight the fragility of reality, of this reality that your player characters are in. Rituals to summon otherworldly beings, cursed artifacts that defy explanation, and spells with catastrophic consequences really blur the line between reality and the supernatural, making it all feel almost dreamlike. In Lamentations, magic isn't just another game mechanic. It's a storytelling device in and of itself. It deepens the weirdness and deepens the horror of the game. And then, finally, there's the unique atmosphere of Lamentations. The tone of Lamentations is as much about the atmosphere as it is about the themes, right? The game thrives on tension and uncertainty, and it encourages referees to lean into evocative descriptions and sensory details to really create an immersive experience. A dungeon isn't just a series of rooms filled with monsters and treasure. It's a decaying, oppressive labyrinth filled with dripping water, foul odors, and unnatural sounds in the distance. A forest isn't just a place to camp. It's a shadowy, labyrinthine nightmare where the trees are closing in on you and every rustle in the undergrowth is danger. Encounters are designed to keep players on edge, to keep them on the edge of their seat, to keep them tense and worried and waiting for the next moment. Even mundane situations, right? Like a locked chest, a dusty corridor, a seemingly abandoned village, they can feel ominous in a way that no other game achieves. Because your players are conditioned in Lamentations to expect the worst. This emphasis on atmosphere gives Lamentations its distinctive feel, right? Players aren't just exploring a dungeon or completing a quest. They're stepping into a world that feels alien, hostile, and utterly unlike our own, which finally brings us to the art and aesthetic of Lamentations, which does as much as anything else to establish the tone and atmosphere of the game. So the artwork in Lamentations of the Flame Princess isn't just decorative. It grabs you, it pulls you in, and it refuses to let go, right? Like, this artwork, more than any other TTRPG I've ever seen, truly grabs you. It's not about making the game look heroic or aspirational. It's about setting the tone, making you feel the horror, the danger, and the moral ambiguity at the heart of Lamentations. From the moment you crack open this book, the visuals demand your attention, and they really establish the unsettling atmosphere that truly defines Lamentations as a game. Most fantasy RPGs fill their pages with noble knights and radiant elves and towering castles, but Lamentations? Well, Lamentations punches you in the face with grit, raw emotion, and imagery that makes you uncomfortable, but again, in the best way possible. The art is unapologetically grotesque, often depicting brutal violence, surreal horror, and twisted humor. Sometimes all at once, in the best ways, all at once. You know, I've come across illustrations that genuinely made me stop and take a breath. Images that unsettled me in ways no RPG art has ever done. And here's the thing, right? That's not bad. If anything, it's creatively inspiring. You'll see eldritch horrors clawing their way into reality, adventurers meeting gruesome graphic ends, and scenes that make you question what's really happening beneath the surface. You know, scenes that really make you question reality. Every piece of art in this game reinforces a simple, inescapable truth. The world of Lamentations is dangerous. The unknown is terrifying, and nothing is ever truly safe. Unlike the idealized heroes of traditional TTRPGs, the adventurers in Lamentations bleed, they break, and die, often in shockingly vivid ways. These depictions reinforce just how brutal and unforgiving the game can be. Your character isn't a destined hero, they're just a person, and the world doesn't care if they live or die. Like, Lamentations artwork isn't afraid to push boundaries, both in content and in style. Some pieces have an old world medieval woodcut aesthetic, while others embrace modern surrealism or grotesque abstraction. But this juxtaposition really mirrors the game's fusion of historical grounding with, bizarre, otherworldly horror. It's amazing. And it doesn't stop at just being weird. Lamentations art challenges you. It forces you to engage with the game's themes on a deeper level. The illustrations aren't designed to make you feel safe or comfortable in any way, shape, or form. They're there to make you think, to unsettle you, and to provoke a sense of wonder and dread. Sometimes it's a stark and visceral depiction of violence that reminds you just how fragile life is in this world. Other times it's a piece dripping with symbolism, leaving you to interpret its meaning for yourself. And either way, the art keeps you off balance, reflecting the unpredictable, chaotic nature of the game itself. I mean, don't get me wrong. At the end of the day, Lamentations art isn't just there to shock or provoke. It's there to complete the experience. The mechanics, the tone, the setting, all of it works in tandem with the visuals to create a fully immersive game, a true horror experience, right? The stark brutality of the rules, the ever-present danger in every decision, and the themes of weird fantasy, they all come to life through the illustrations in this book. It cements them in a way that just merely text can't, right? They don't just complement the text, they enhance it, adding an unspoken narrative that deepens the immersion for the referee and for the player. It heightens the stakes, it sets the mood, it ensures that every session feels like a descent into the unknown, a place that you shouldn't be, right? So, like, whether I'm flipping through the book for inspiration or I'm checking the rules mid-session, the art ensures that Lamentations' weird, wonderful, and deeply unsettling world is always at the forefront of my mind. And that's what it's meant for, right? So speaking of what it's meant for, who is Lamentations meant for? Lamentations of the Flame Princess isn't your typical tabletop RPG. And honestly, it's not for everyone. This game doesn't hold your hand or offer up feel-good heroics. Instead, it dives headfirst into horror, moral ambiguity, and the grotesque, stripping away the polish of traditional high fantasy in favor of something raw, something unsettling, and something that's just unpredictable. So let's be real, right? Lamentations of the Flame Princess, it's not for everyone. It's just not. And that's fine. Its dark tone, mature themes, and high-stakes gameplay can be a lot, right? Especially if you're used to more modern high fantasy heroic adventures, right? But Lamentations speaks to me, and ultimately, I think it speaks to a certain kind of player and referee, right? Like those who want something darker, something stranger, and something more challenging than just your standard high fantasy RPG fare. I mean, RPGs are about storytelling. They're about creativity and exploration. They let us examine the human condition and navigate moral dilemmas and really immerse ourselves in experiences that are outside of our everyday lives. And the truth is, Lamentations excels at this. It is wonderful at this. At its best, Lamentations makes me uncomfortable. It makes me question my own paradigm, and it challenges me, not just as a player, but as a person, right? In my opinion, this is where Lamentations shines. This is its sweet spot. This is where it lives. But, this is a game where failure is real, and death is common, and morality is anything but black and white. So if you prefer clear-cut good versus evil narratives or a more traditional fantasy setting, Lamentations probably won't be your thing, right? If you're looking for epic heroism and noble quests, this isn't that game. There are lots of those games out there. This isn't that. But if you are like me and you want a world where every choice feels heavy, the unknown is terrifying, and just survival is never guaranteed, then Lamentations delivers an experience like no other. So is Lamentations the game for you? Is it right for your table? Honestly, I can't really answer that. But I can say Lamentations of the Flame Princess is definitely for me, and it's a staple at my table. And it is for those of us who want our RPGs to feel raw, unpredictable, and impossible to forget. It's for players who crave high stakes, who aren't afraid to take risks, and for referees who love crafting strange, unsettling worlds that challenge and surprise their players. If you're a fan of weird fantasy and horror, right, and you want your game to feel as surreal and disturbing and mesmerizing as the fiction you love, Lamentations is exactly that, right? This is a game that pushes boundaries, challenges expectations, and throws you into a world that's both beautiful and grotesque. It does both. You won't feel safe or heroic, but that's the whole point. I don't want to feel safe in my RPGs, and I don't necessarily want to be the good guy in my RPGs. I'm a good guy in real life. I want to explore something different. This game is about survival, creativity, and staring into the unknown with nothing but your wits and luck to guide you. If you're willing to embrace the darkness that is Lamentations of the Flame Princess, I promise you, this game delivers an RPG experience like no other. It is truly unique. But I want to know what you think. Let me know what you think of Lamentations in the comments down below. Let's talk about it. And hey, if you don't have it and you want to see if it's right for you or right for your table, you can download the no art version of the Rules and Magic book for Lamentations for free at DriveThruRPG. It's not going to contain the artwork, which is, a great part of having the book, but you can check the rules and see if they, if it works for you, right? So I've dropped a link in the description and in the pinned comment to the official Lamentations website and to DriveThruRPG where, you can check it out. Okay, that's going to do it for today's Stat Rollers. If you enjoyed this review, hit that like button, subscribe for more TTRPG content. I've got quite a few reviews coming covering a wide variety of classic, OSR, and indie games and supplements, including, more OSR rule sets and some adventures for Lamentations. And remember to drop a comment letting me know what you think of Lamentations of the Flame Princess below. Let's talk about it. So until next time, grab your dice, keep your lantern close, and tread carefully. There are things lurking in the dark that neither sword nor spell can save you from. And as always, may the dice roll ever in your favor.